if at all possible. So anything that seems to combine godly things and worldly things is disgusting. To the spiritually minded person, he'll tell you Islam is too materialistic. And to the materialistic minded person, he'll tell you Islam is too spiritual. Well, that's what makes it different. Because the Muslim lives in the real world. The world can cause you a lot of trouble. There's a lot of evil in the world. As a matter of fact, God made it. He made that evil that's in the world. But He made the world, so the whole thing is good. He told you about the parts that you should watch out for. As an example, I mean, you may have a bush and it's got bright red berries growing on it. If a man eats those berries, he gets sick and dies. But if a bird eats those berries, he gets fat and healthy. So it's evil for the man and it's good for the bird. The things that are not good for man are the kinds of things the Qur'an warns us about. Like, stay away from this, it's not good for you. Well, but it's there for a good reason. So the world is good. Just be careful. You live in it. And your reward, what it is you're trying to gain, is supposed to be something like what you're familiar with now. If you know how pleasant it is to sit in the shade under a tree, maybe put your feet in the water and eat a piece of fruit, well, the Qur'an says that's something like what your reward is in paradise. You'll have a shade tree and a piece of fruit, your feet in the water. Only when you eat that piece of fruit, you'll say, this reminds me of the fruit I used to eat. But it's so different. More special. In a way that we probably can't imagine. But the point of it all is, what you do now, what you're trying to establish now, is something like what you hope you'll get. Your activity is related to the finished goal. See, in this way, Islam doesn't often, or doesn't always, function like a religion to most people's minds. To give an example, I mentioned the other night in Colombo, Islam prohibits intoxicants, or usually you'd consider alcohol or drugs or whatever, but Islam prohibits alcohol. Does it do that in a religious way? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't function like a religion when it prohibits alcohol. Not drinking alcohol is not a religious duty. It's functioning like a science. If you ask any doctor, say, would I be better off if I gave up drinking alcohol? He'll tell you yes, as a matter of fact. See, that's not a religious thing. It's a sensible, it's a good, it's a practical thing. The religion, if you will, Islam is functioning like a science. It's telling you something that a lot of other people know. It's not some sacred, hidden secret. It's reminding you, don't forget this, because if you'll take a careful look, you'll see it's true. You shouldn't intoxicate yourself. And many other things. If it tells you don't eat this, it's because it's not good for you, not because it's holy and you shouldn't touch it, or it's filthy and you shouldn't touch it. It's filthy in the sense that it'll hurt you. Let somebody else eat it. Let some other creature, or let it do whatever function it has. But human beings, you shouldn't eat this. You shouldn't drink that, and so on. It's acting like a science, not as a religion, where some things are forbidden and some things are commanded without any reason except that they're somehow holy or unholy. What that means, I suppose, if you want to present Islam or make it look attractive to somebody, is that you can try to tell them that whether you believe what I believe or not, I still have a recipe here or a method which makes me successful, it makes me healthy, it gives me good laws to live by. This is the kind of thing that has gone on, I can tell you lots of stories this way, it's gone on in science and in legal practice and in personal lives, where a lot of people have said they don't like Islam at all, but they know that the Muslims have a good idea about this or that or the other thing, so they want to find out more to see if they have any more good ideas. They're examining it for the value that it seems to have. I would hope that they continue that process, and it reaches the point where they realize, where did all this come from anyway? And somebody said to me a couple of years ago, a young woman who kept coming after a series of lectures and wanted to argue about this or that. And I talked a great deal about the content of the Qur'an, and finally she said to me, okay, you convinced me. The man who wrote that book, she figures the prophet of Islam, and who wrote this book, she says, okay, he was a genius. Because this is brilliant. Doesn't mean he was a prophet. So I just remind her, it was the last thing I said to her. This was in the Emirates. She happened to be staying there. She was Chinese, but I said, you're telling me the man is a genius? You're convinced he's brilliant? She says, yes, because of all these different things. I said, but remember, the man himself said that this didn't come out of his head. He said an angel gave it to him. I said, was he a genius when he said that? Or was he crazy? She had to think about that. A couple of months went by and somebody telephoned me from the Emirates. He was talking about something else, and then he happened to mention, he says, oh, by the way, do you remember that woman you talked with? Said she accepted Islam last night. Went around in her mind for about 30 days, I guess, realizing that if the man's a genius, but he said he used to talk to an angel, I have a problem trying to figure out how can that be so. But that really is another story which we talked about the other night in Colombo under the title of The Amazing Qur'an, and maybe some of that information, and there's a great deal more can be made available to you. We concluded that talk by trying to say that if somebody insists that Muslims are misguided, the Muslim should follow the advice of the Qur'an. What does it tell us about when people say things? It tells us over and over again, whatever anybody says, it tells us, tell him to bring his proof. If he says it, make him show it. Don't just let him say it, but ask him to show you that that's true. Don't just keep telling me, show me. That applies in everything. So if somebody said, you Muslims are misguided, you want to ask, can you show me one thing that is a misguidance? Can you prove to me that this is right, but I am wrong? Show me where I have been deceived. If somebody says the Qur'an is a book of lies, tell them, show me one lie. Just one lie. You said it's full of lies, show me one. And be careful, because what people will usually do, they will fool themselves. They will show you maybe something in the Qur'an that they don't like, or something they disagree with, but what you asked them was, show me a lie. Show me something which the whole world knows is true. No one will argue, but in the Qur'an, it says something different. Show me a lie, not something you don't like, or something different than what it says in your book, unless you can prove your book is right. A lie is what you're looking for. If Muslims are misunderstood, and they certainly are, it is for at least three different reasons. It's either by accident, that people misunderstand but they don't mean to, or they are misunderstood deliberately. People mean to misunderstand them, that is, some people make sure that Islam is misunderstood, or it could be our own fault that we're misunderstood. To give an example of each of these three things, people may be misunderstood that is, Muslims may be misunderstood by accident, because there's hardly a week goes by, at least in Canada, that there won't be some silly newspaper article that says something about Islam or the history of Muslims which simply isn't true, but it says so. Just a few weeks ago, Toronto Sun told us all that, in the first place, it started off in one article by telling us that Ramadan was the month of pilgrimage, which shows how much research they did. But an article goes on to say that once upon a time there were 600 Jews who they were very nice people, but Muhammad decided to cut all their heads off. So they didn't do anything wrong, but he killed them all, men, women, and children. Well, is that what happened? Was there such a situation? A lot of people believe that because it's in the newspaper. It's unfortunate. The man who wrote it probably believes it, because he got it out of a book in the public library. But what a lot of people don't seem to realize is a lot of that stuff that's in the public library is a repetition of still older material which was originally false. But it's so old that people forget it started off as something false.